I'm Mira Valdez, 35, and for most people, including my husband, I'm just a discreet hospitality consultant who's good with spreadsheets and late-night calls. The truth is less ordinary. I founded and quietly run Stellaris Heritage Hotels, a collection of restored landmark properties that look like they've always been there and work like clockwork because I never stop thinking about them. I prefer the shadows. Money puts a gloss on every conversation. Anonymity lets me hear what people really mean. The call that jolted me out of the shadows came on a gray Tuesday. Mrs. Valdez, a crisp voice asked, "This is Sienna from Premier Vows regarding the Spencer Jenkins wedding. My husband is Adrian Spencer. The groom is his younger brother Caleb. I'm calling to confirm that Mr. Spencer has updated your RSVP to not attending." She continued, but requested we keep the venue deposit you arranged. I didn't answer right away. Through my office window, Chicago's skyline looked like wet graphite. The deposit was $50,000 wired quietly through a holding company I use when I want a problem to disappear before it becomes a problem. "I understand," I said, because at that instant I understood too much. Before I tell you what that moment set in motion, I should explain how I got there. I grew up in Lakeview in a narrow brick house where my parents ran a modest guest house that smelled of fresh sheets and strong coffee. I learned hospitality the way other kids learn piano scales: greet, anticipate, recover, repeat. We never had extra money, but we had returning guests who became Christmas card friends. At 18, with a scholarship and a chipped suitcase, I left for a state university to study business. My dorm was tiny, my meals were cheap, and my calendar was a mosaic of classes and shifts. I didn't sleep much, but the exhaustion felt like a down payment on a future only I could see. During senior year, a visiting executive named Vivian Cho noticed how my questions drilled past branding into operations. She hired me as an analyst and then a fixer. Under her wing, I learned to read a P&L like a weather map and to spot a property with good bones beneath bad wallpaper. At 25, I took a reckless, precise leap. I bought a failing motor lodge near O'Hare, stripped it down to plaster, reopened with a new name, and a lobby that made people linger. 6 months later, the numbers stopped scaring me. A year after that, I had lenders returning my calls. Over the next decade, I acquired, restored, and repositioned. I named the collection Stellaris for my grandmother Estella, who could make a table setting feel like a celebration. Success taught me something odd disclosure distorts. Put a number next to your name and watch how voices tilt. So I kept mine off the brochures. My public bio said strategic advisor. I let general managers enjoy the spotlight. I signed from the holding company. I sat in the back of ballrooms. I met Adrian at an alumni forum where I was the anonymous industry practitioner on a panel about historic preservation. He was a historian, tall, warm, dryly funny, who could talk for an hour about flying buttresses and then ask a question that made you feel like he'd been listening for two. Our first date was at a cafe that survived because the owner never chased trends, exactly my kind of place. We talked about cathedrals, old movies, and why good service feels like kindness rather than choreography. He didn't care who sat at which table or where the grants came from. He cared about craftsmanship and context. With him, I felt known for things that never show up on a balance sheet. We married within a year, small, simple, not at a Stellaris property. I told him I had savings from consulting that would help us buy a house without panic. He didn't press. He offered what he had: steadiness, a professor's salary, and tenderness that made my chest ache. I thought withholding my scale would protect us from the distortions I feared. I also thought love would be enough to blunt the edges of his family. Adrian's parents, Martin and Celeste Spencer, curate their lives like a magazine spread. Martin works in finance. Celeste chairs committees that have platinum donor plaques. Their conversations are fluent in rankings and good families. Adrian's brother Caleb entered real estate straight out of business school and treated every dinner like a pitch. The first time I met them, Celeste's compliments had serrations. That dress is brave, very modern. You wear it confidently. I brushed it off. People stare at reflections of themselves. Sometimes they don't like what they see. We survived Sundays in the suburbs with small talk about travel and the market. When Celeste teased that academia was a lovely hobby, and surely Adrian had considered more influential paths, he laughed it off. When Caleb joked that consultants were people who couldn't lead, I asked him pleasantly how many payrolls he'd signed. The smile he returned didn't reach his eyes. The announcement arrived like a trumpet fanfare at one of those Sunday dinners. Caleb swept in with Ava Jenkins' sleek dress, perfect posture, a handshake that felt like a clause declaring they were engaged. "We've already booked the Crescent Royale," he said, beaming. I slid my glass back to the coaster. The Crescent Royale is Stellaris' flagship, a Beaux-Arts Grande Dame we gutted and rebirthed 2 years ago, a hotel that makes me proud every time I step through the revolving door. It's astronomical, Caleb added, but Ava deserves the best, and the room will be full of her father's people. Thomas Jenkins develops gleaming towers. His name travels ahead of him. Celeste's eyes shone the way they do at benefits when the cameras turn. I said nothing. There are times to plant a flag and times to take notes. Later in our kitchen, Adrian floated between excitement and nerves. "It's a big deal for Caleb," he said, "and for my parents. The Jenkins circle, well, it's a lot. I made tea. You don't have to be anyone but yourself," I told him. He nodded, but I watched him practicing the forks in his head. 2 days later, Caleb and Ava visited our house. Ava toured the room as if it were a listing. Cozy, she said, the way realtors say charming when the ceiling is low. Caleb outlined the purchase they were closing: 5,000 square feet, a lap pool, a climate-controlled cellar. "Dad's helping with the down payment," he said. Over dinner, he complained about the Crescent's rates. 50 grand just to walk through the door, he groaned. Martin called it extortion. Celeste called it the price of excellence. I said I knew people and could ask for a professional consideration. Caleb smiled the smile he saves for interns. "That's sweet, Mira. This is a high society wedding." The next morning, I phoned Noelle, my executive assistant, and asked her to arrange a discreet courtesy adjustment through the Crescent's events team. Nothing on letterhead, everything through the holding company. Then I approved the transfer for the deposit, $50,000. I told myself it was a gift they didn't need to know came from me, a small insurance policy for peace. The truth sat heavier. I was trying to buy my way out of a war I didn't want to fight. In the weeks that followed, conversations at the Spencer house turned into rehearsals for a performance I hadn't auditioned for. There were seating charts and tasting menus and tux fittings Adrian attended without me, because as Celeste put it, coordination is simpler with immediate family. When she invited me to browse dresses with Ava, I chose a midnight blue sheath that felt like quiet authority. Celeste suggested pastels. "The photos have a palette," she said lightly, "and we wouldn't want you to stand out for the wrong reasons." I smiled and let the hanger rest. Later in the boutique's hallway, I heard her murmur, "Adrian rushed that marriage. She's not our usual milieu." I pretended I hadn't. At home, when I said the comments were cutting, Adrian kissed my temple and said his mother didn't mean it that way. "They're anxious," he said. "This event matters to them." I stared at the steam rising from my mug and pictured the Crescent's ballroom. The terrazzo floors, the chandeliers we rescued from a warehouse in Lyon, the way sound lingers there like a compliment. It would be a beautiful wedding. If only beauty could teach people manners. I didn't rescind the deposit. I didn't correct anyone's assumptions. I did what I always do under stress. I organized. I worked. I watched. And as the calendar moved toward the date printed on Premier Vow's letterhead, I told myself a story about harmony I hoped was still true. I had no idea how quickly that story would come apart. The weeks hardened into a schedule that didn't include me. What began as one planning session became family-only updates, then fittings and tastings Adrian attended without a backward glance. He brought home garment bags and embossed cards. I brought home silence. Coordination is smoother with immediate family, Celeste said on a Sunday call, voice bright as cut glass. "Too many opinions make the soufflé fall." "I'm not an opinion," I said. "I'm Adrian's wife." "Of course you are, dear," she replied, as if labeling me solved the problem. At first, I tried to trust the process. I answered emails, visited sites under renovation, let the hum of operations drown out the hurt. But the pattern sharpened. Adrian started taking calls on the back porch. His voice lowered, the pacing familiar. He began locking his phone, a small button press that thudded like a verdict. One evening, he tossed his leather folio onto the kitchen island. While he showered, a cardstock corner slid free, a draft seating diagram printed on pale champagne paper, the Crescent Royale's ballroom, rendered as a lattice of circles. At the center family table, name after name in elegant serif type, Martin, Celeste, Caleb, Ava, a handful of Jenkins. My eyes searched for Mira, the way you pat your coat for keys you know you left inside. I found the word Spencer again and again. I did not find myself. When he stepped back into the kitchen, damp hair combed into order, I pushed the paper across the marble. "Where am I?" "It's preliminary," he said too quickly, tapping an empty ring on his finger against the island. "Placeholders. Placeholders that include second cousins and clients, but somehow not your wife. Please don't go through my things," he said, and I felt the door close. 2 nights later, we dressed for the engagement party at a private dining club that smelled faintly of cedar and old money. Place cards glittered at the entrance like badges. A hostess in pearls escorted Adrian to a table with his parents, the couple, and Jenkins' executives. My card sent me to a round of colleagues from Caleb's office and a cousin I'd never met. When I caught Adrian's eye across the room, he offered a helpless shrug that asked me not to make him choose. "Don't make a scene," his look begged. I didn't. I smiled, asked the cousin about her dog, and watched my husband laugh at jokes I couldn't hear. After dessert, pistachio semifreddo, that tasted like a secret you weren't supposed to keep. I stepped into the hallway and called Noelle. "How are our crescent logs?" I asked. "Any anomalies?" "Nothing operational," she said. Though Premier Vows has sent multiple rounds of revised guest lists and seating notes from the Spencer side, a little fluid. "Can you request the latest under the events alias?" I said, keeping my voice even, and forward it to my personal. "Done," she said. "Mira, are you okay?" "I'm gathering facts," I said, and hung up before my voice cracked. The email landed in under 10 minutes. I opened the PDF on my phone and scrolled past florid headers until I reached the notes section. There, in a calm, administrative tone, "Please ensure Mira Valdez is not included in ceremony or reception arrangements. Mr. Adrian Spencer will be attending without a spouse for family cohesion in photographs and table flow." I stared until the words broke into useless shapes. Family cohesion. I closed the file and for a minute rested my forehead against the cool marble of a console table. When I returned to the dining room, I sat through toasts about loyalty and unity without tasting a word. At home, I tried to tell Adrian what I'd seen. "You're misunderstanding," he said, hands raised a teacher soothing a classroom. "There are photography logistics. Ava has a vision. The Jenkinses have expectations. We're avoiding friction by deleting me. Nobody is deleting you." He exhaled. "You could come to the ceremony and skip the reception if that feels easier." "Easier for whom?" He looked at the wall over my shoulder. "We're all under pressure, Mira." "And what are you under?" "The pressure of wanting everyone to get along," he said, "for one day." He kissed my hair and left a ghost of cologne and apology that made me feel oddly seasick. The next week was a collage of small humiliations. At the boutique, Celeste arranged a Champagne Girls' Day with Ava and 3 attendants. I arrived on time for a final fitting I'd booked. The receptionist's smile faltered. "Oh, today is reserved for the bridal party." "I'm family." "Of course," she murmured, eyes flitting toward Celeste, who materialized with a hug that didn't land. "We're keeping today tight," Celeste said, voice syruped. "No spoilers. You understand?" I set the dress bag back on the counter and stepped aside as if I had simply lost my place in line. That night, Adrian came home late, his tie askew, the relief of wine on his breath. "Menu tasting ran long," he said, which was interesting because I'd overseen it that morning from an operations status sheet. I didn't ask for proof. I didn't want to hear a version of the truth designed to keep me quiet. The next afternoon, the back porch whispers returned. I slipped to the hallway, lowered myself to the top stair where the sound carried, and listened through the slit of an open window. "I'm working on it." Adrian's voice thin with effort. "Yes." "No, she doesn't know the details." "Caleb." "I know. The optics." "I said I'm handling it." My name hovered unspoken like a smudge. She, it. I set my fists on my knees until I felt my pulse in my palms. The following morning, while Adrian showered the phone he'd left charging on the dresser, lit up with a preview Caleb. Any progress on the MV situation, I told myself not to look. Then I told myself I needed to know. The thread was short and ugly. "Adrian working on it. It's complicated." Caleb, simplify it. Ava's father is on edge. We can't have outliers in photos. Adrian, I get it. Caleb. Do you, because she keeps asking questions? Handle it. There was nothing to misinterpret, nothing to translate. I placed the phone back as if it might shatter. That night, I called Noelle again. If a Crescent client tried to remove a spouse from an event without her consent, I said, what would our contract say? It would say we take instructions from the contracting party of record. She replied, professional as always. However, in this case, she paused. The deposit came from Stellaris Holdings, not a private card. On purpose, I said. Mira, she said softly, do you want me to loop Anthony quietly? Not yet, I said. Thank you. I told myself I could endure one day. I told myself I didn't need a table card to know who I was. Then at 2:13 a.m., the story I was clinging to slipped. Adrian came home later than late. Seeding crisis, he said, dropping his keys. We had to move a Jenkins aunt with a dairy allergy. I read the note you sent Premier Vows, I said evenly. The one asking them to exclude me from all arrangements. He froze, then recovered with a wince of a smile. You shouldn't read things out of context. No context makes that sentence honorable. It's not personal, he said, and the words hit me like a slap. You didn't grow up in these circles. There are nuances. I don't want you to be uncomfortable or to accidentally embarrass you, I supplied. He flinched. It's one day. Afterward, we'll take that main trip you've talked about. Just you and me. He reached for reassurance like a man putting pressure on a wound he'd inflicted. I stepped back. I won't be bartered with vacations, I said. His shoulders sagged. Please don't make this harder. I'm not making it anything, I said. I'm noticing it. When the door closed behind him the next morning, the house held a silence that roared. I set a mug of coffee on the counter and watched the steam waver until it vanished. Then I put the mug in the sink, sat on the edge of our bed, and cried so hard I felt my ribs. There is a grief that comes when a person you love becomes a stranger you're still married to. It is not a loud grief. It is a weight that rearranges your posture. When I could breathe again, I showered, braided my hair with hands that wanted to shake, and zipped a simple black dress that felt like armor. I reached for my phone to call Noelle to say it was time, though I hadn't decided what time meant when an unknown number flashed across the screen. Mrs. Valdez. The voice was bright with practiced warmth. This is Sienna from Premier Vows. I'm the planner managing the Spencer Jenkins celebration at the Crescent Royale. Yes, I said, standing very still. I'm calling to confirm 2 items for our files, she continued. First, that you will not be attending today's events. Second, per our conversation with Mr. Spencer, that the venue may retain the deposit you arranged. The room focused to a pinpoint, the way a lens does before the shutter clicks. In that narrow clarity, something straightened inside me. Not anger, not yet, but alignment. Is that your understanding? She asked. I looked at the sunlight sliding across the floorboards, at the life I had kept deliberately partitioned at the dress hanging in a bag from a boutique that had decided I wasn't part of the picture. I lifted the phone back to my ear. It is my understanding, I said slowly, choosing each word that I have not been heard. Mrs. Valdez, she prompted, the brightness of her tone fraying. I exhaled once long and even, and let the executive part of my brain come fully online. The part that reads contracts before dawn and builds empires out of failing lobbies. The part that remembers every clause I have ever paid a lawyer to write. Please stay on the line, I said, and reached for the second phone on my desk. Please stay on the line, I tell Sienna and set my cell on speaker. With my other hand, I lift the black desk phone that only a few people know exists and punch a number I could dial half asleep. Anthony Keller comes the answer on the second ring, calm, threaded with static. It's rare to rattle my general manager at the Crescent Royale. It's Mira, I say. Effective, immediately suspend the Spencer Jenkins event. No food to the floor, no beverage pours, no vendor load-ins beyond what's required for safe breakdown. Hold staff in place until I arrive. A beat. Understood. Are we invoking the executive clause? Yes. I'll take responsibility for all communications. Copy that. A micropause. You okay? I'm fine, I lie. I'll be there within the hour. I drop the receiver, pick up my cell again. Sienna, still with me? Yes, she says, brittle brightness fraying. Miss Valdez, note the following for your file. I say the cadence of a deposition steadying me. Stellaris Holdings is the contracting party of record. I am its principal. You will receive written confirmation of the suspension within 5 minutes. Do not communicate changes to guests yet. All outward messaging routes through the hotel. Suspension, she echoes weakly. Suspension, I confirm, then hang up before empathy can slow me down. Noelle, I say into my second line. Send me the wire proof for the $50,000 deposit from Stellaris Holdings. Forward the contract addendum, invoking owner's discretion in cases of reputational risk and non-compliance with event conduct standards. PDF personal email. Also call Estella Catering and freeze all prep. No fires lit. And tell wardrobe to courier my navy suit to the Crescent's executive entrance in 40 minutes. On it, she says. Mira. I know, I say softly. Me too. I change the black dress for a clean white shirt and the charcoal jacket I wear when I need to look like an answer. Hair slicked back, pearls at my throat. Estella's cool as a benediction. By the time I reach the garage, Noelle's email pings with attachments wire. Confirmation the addendum I insisted on years ago when a hedge fund prince punched a florist because the peonies were coral instead of blush. We had rewritten the contracts after that power quiet as a clause. Traffic parts. The Crescent Royale rises out of downtown like an old song that still knows the words. I pull into the executive bay and take the service corridors I've walked 1,000 times, past silver racks of dishes staged like armor, past banquet captains with clipboards held like shields. Staff straighten as I pass. Ms. Valdez, someone says. And the title does what I need it to do. It turns my spine to steel. Anthony meets me outside the Astor Suite, which we use as staging when the ballroom is dressed. His jaw is set. We've stopped all active service. Vendors are in a holding pattern. The wedding party is in there. He nods at the door. They demanded to see whoever's in charge. They're about to, I say. We step inside. Chaos has manners when it's wealthy. Flowers tilt in their urns but do not topple. A bridesmaid blotches at the corner of her eye, careful not to smudge. Celeste's hands carve the air at a junior coordinator who looks 2 eyelashes away from tears. Martin's voice is low and legal, on a phone call I don't envy. Caleb paces between windows like a suit on a runway. Ava sits in a halo of silk at the vanity mascara, tracking a clean line along one cheek. Who are you? Celeste demands, turning the way one turns at a draft. Good morning, I say. Let's have the room. Anthony gestures, and our people disappear with the professional speed of a stagehand blackout. He remains at the door, a steady presence. Caleb rounds on me. This is outrageous, he says, pointing to the air like a summons. Who do you think you are? Exactly who I've always been, I say quietly, though perhaps not who you assumed. Martin ends his call with a tight promise of litigation and steps forward, cuffs immaculate. We'll require the general manager immediately, he says. You have him, I nod toward Anthony, and you have me, which would be... Martin's impatience is a thread. He expects the world to unravel when he pulls it. Anthony clears his throat. Mrs. Valdez is the principal of Stellaris Heritage Hotels and the owner of the Crescent Royale. Silence. It's not the stunned kind you see in movies. It's the recalculating kind I see at board tables, the kind that shuffles columns and spits out a new result. Celeste's face runs through disbelief to a smile sharpened on the way. Oh, she says, bright as the stemware. Well, that certainly simplifies matters. We had no idea, dear. That, I say, has been the theme. The door opens again. Adrian enters, stops, as if he's hit an invisible step and takes in the tableau, me in a suit he's never seen, Anthony at my shoulder, his family arranged like a case study. Mira, he says, throat dry. What I should have done months ago, I answer. Sienna slips in behind him, cheeks flushed. I'm so sorry, she whispers toward me and makes herself small against the wall. Ava rises, the weight of her dress gathering like a wave at her ankles. Is our wedding canceled? She asks, voice steady where her hands are not. Suspended, I say, for now. On what grounds? Caleb snaps. We have a contract. We have guests arriving. You have a contract with Stellaris Holdings, I say, lifting the folder Noelle couriered. I slide out the single-page addendum and place it on the vanity away from powder and panic. Clause 10C allows the owner to suspend or terminate an event in cases of reputational risk or non-compliance with conduct standards at the owner's sole discretion. The deposit originated from Stellaris. The party of record is my company. Here is the wire. Here is the clause. Here I tap the second sheet are the notes from Premier Vows requesting my exclusion from all arrangements for family cohesion. Martin's mouth opens and closes once like a man testing a tooth. Celeste recovers first. There's been a misunderstanding, she says smoothly. Adrian explained that my presence might embarrass you, I say. I keep my voice where it belongs, low and even. He said it wasn't personal, but contracts are not social. They are very personal. Adrian flinches. Mira, please, can we talk alone? No, I say, and my refusal is not cruel, only firm. For too long, everything happened in hallways and sidebars. We'll do this in the room. Caleb points at the papers with the confidence of a boy who never had to read small print. You wouldn't dare blow up a Jenkins wedding, he says, as if daring is a currency he controls. Do you have any idea? I have every idea, I cut in. I know what a room full of cameras looks like when a story goes sideways. I know what it costs to reset a ballroom in 2 hours. I also know what it costs to build a life where you aren't invited to your own family table. Ava's gaze flicks from me to Adrian. Is it true, she asks him softly. You told them to exclude her. Adrian looks at the carpet. I said it would be simpler, he manages. For whom, Ava says, and something in her posture straightens as if a seam has been realigned. Celeste steps toward me with the air of a woman trying a new language. We apologize if feelings were hurt, she begins. No, I say, not raising my voice. Not if. They were. And not feelings. Respect. Words matter. She stops, then tries again without the conditional. We. Her eyes flick to Martin, who gives a fractional nod. I disrespected you. I'm sorry. The apology skates on calculation, but it exists. It sits on the table next to the wireproof like a small hard object. Martin smooths his tie. We would prefer the event to proceed, he says. Tell us what you need to make that possible. I turn to the window. Outside, the Crescent's marquee throws its light onto the sidewalk where guests will soon step out of cars into weather I cannot control. Inside, I can control almost everything. The power isn't in canceling, it's in setting terms. The wedding can proceed, I say, under conditions. Caleb bristles. Conditions. Caleb. Ava's voice slices cleanly. He closes his mouth. Here they are, I say, enumerating with the same hand I use to count staff at lineup. 1. I am seated with my husband at the family table for both ceremony and reception. 2. There will be no attempts to crop relocate or otherwise diminish my presence in formal photographs. 3. Each of you. I touch the air toward Celeste Martin, and finally, after a breath, Adrian offers a direct apology without qualifiers. 4. Going forward, any family gathering that includes spouses includes me by default. I am not a +1 to my own marriage. Silence again, then a small sound from Sienna as if a knot has loosened in her chest. Martin nods once. Agreed. Celeste inhales, holds, releases. Agreed. She says the word costly for her and correct. Caleb looks to Ava, finds no rescue there, and mutters agreed. Adrian takes a step closer. Mira, he says, and his voice is nothing like the one he uses in lecture halls. I'm sorry. I failed you. I thought I could keep the peace by erasing the part of this that made them uncomfortable. That was cowardly and cruel. I didn't stand up for you, and that is not the man I want to be. I am sorry without excuse. Something in my chest shifts. Not forgiveness. Recognition. Anthony, I say without looking away from Adrian. Resume. Inform culinary that Estella may light fires. Bars to pour. Vendors to load. Sienna, the family table chart is about to change. You'll get a revision in 5 minutes. Yes, Ms. Valdez, Anthony says already on his radio. Team, we are green. Repeat, we are green. Sienna exhales like a diver breaking surface. I'll update the plan. I turn back to Celeste. One more thing I say. Today I'll wear navy. It complements your palette. A small courtesy since we're all adjusting. A flicker of humor surprise at the edges tugs at the corner of her mouth. Thank you, she says, and for once the gratitude might be real. Ava steps forward, hands fisted in tulle to keep from stumbling. Up close, she looks younger than her posture makes her seem. Thank you for not ending it, she says to me. I didn't know they had uninvited you. If I had, I would have. She stops. I want to marry into a family that values people more than pictures. Then help make it one, I say. Her chin lifts. I will. In the corridor, movement gathers with purpose instead of panic. The chandelier in the ballroom hums as dimmers test their way to glow. From the kitchen, the first clean clang of a sauté pan rings like a starting bell. Anthony walks me to the service elevator. "You sure?" he asks, voice low. "I'm sure," I say. "Canceling would be satisfying. Repairing will be useful." The elevator doors close. I lean my head back against cool mirrored steel and allow myself exactly 3 breaths that are not steady. By the time the doors open onto the executive floor, I am composed. My suit arrives in a garment bag the color of good coffee. I change in my office a walnut and brass room Adrian has never seen with the practiced speed of someone who has worked behind curtains. As I fasten the last button, I catch my reflection and see not a disguise but alignment, the woman who reads contracts, the woman who remembers how beds should be made, the woman who will not be asked to vanish. On my way back down, I call Noelle. Status: "Estella's firing on all burners," she says. "Front desk holding guest messaging until your go." And Mira Legal flagged a media inquiry from a society blogger sniffing around. "We've declined comment. If they publish, I say. We won't feed it. Copy. Anything else?" "Yes." After this, we reassess protocols. I don't ever want a spouse of record removed without a conversation with me. "Already drafting," she says. The ballroom is a machine coming back to life. Florists refluff. Banquet captains recalibrate. Sienna's team reroutes a procession like air traffic control murmuring copy into headsets. Anthony hands me a revised seating chart, my name in the place it should have been all along, simple as typography. Guests start to arrive, swish of dresses. Cologne that arrives half a second early, the low static of expensive small talk. I stand with Adrian in the antechamber, the two of us side by side, as if that is normal. He reaches for my hand. I let him take it, feel the apology in his palm, then slide free to adjust his boutonniere. We stage ourselves for the photograph that will say one thing to strangers and another to those who know. After he whispers, "Can we talk?" After. "Yes," I say, "after." The ceremony itself unfolds with the precision I require of this building. Strings climb. Vows are spoken without a tremor. In the front row, our row, I feel Celeste's glance like a moth at the edge of my vision and do not turn to meet it. When the officiant pronounces, the room bursts into that particular relief people feel when a future has been successfully declared. At the reception, I do what I have always done, attend to 100 small angles so the room feels effortless. I thank a guest who compliments the chandeliers without telling him I rescued them from a warehouse in Lyon. I answer a question about the pastry with a smile that does not reveal the recipe card in my head. I pose for photographs next to my husband and do not allow myself to shrink. During toasts, Martin stands, taps his crystal with a fork, and is almost generous. He thanks vendors by name, then hesitates, looks at me and adds, "And to our daughter-in-law whose steadfastness is a gift to this family." The room applauds politely, unaware that they are clapping for a détente. Caleb's best man speech is loud and clean, and studded with jokes about loyalty. The word hangs for a second longer when Adrian lifts his glass to echo it and finds me instead. He lowers the glass and says nothing. Silence, for once, is the best thing he offers. Near midnight, as the band softens to standards, I step into the service hall to check the final course. Adrian follows. 5 minutes, he says. That's all I'm asking. I lead him to my office because if we're going to speak, it will be on ground where I am not erased. He closes the door and looks around like a man who has found a map to a city his wife built. "You kept this from me." "I kept this from everyone who wanted to change when they looked at me," I say. "But you were not supposed to be everyone." He sits. He doesn't reach for me. "I've started therapy," he says quietly. "I have a lot to learn about where my reflex to appease comes from. I am not asking for forgiveness tonight. I am asking for the chance to become someone who doesn't need forgiveness like oxygen. I believe in renovations. I also believe in inspections. Actions, I say. Time." He nods. "Yes." We return to the party in 2 separate lines that converge at the doorway. The night finishes the way it should for a room like this. Glasses, stacked compliments, paid shoes held by their straps as feet finally protest performance. At the end, Sienna squeezes my hand as if something has been set back on its hinges. On the curb beneath the marquee, a photographer angles for a shot that will land in a glossy column by Thursday. Light glances off the brass. Ava steps into a car and looks back, meeting my eyes with a nod that contains both thanks and intention. Caleb, for once, says nothing. I stand under the sign that bears the name of the building I saved and let the cool air rinse the heat from my skin. Above me, the letters glow certain as constellations. The morning after the wedding, I woke in the Crescent's executive suite to a skyline that looked washed and honest. I brewed coffee, opened the window, and let the cold come in like a truth I could finally breathe. By noon, I packed a week's worth of clothes and moved into my downtown apartment, the place I use when a project requires proximity and a clear head. I left our house as it was, closets arranged by Celeste's standards of company ready, a dining room set like an exhibit. I needed distance that wasn't dramatic, only real. I also needed help I couldn't give myself. I called Dr. Ishu, a therapist, a friend recommended for people who are good at managing everything but their own hearts. In her office, a quiet room with books arranged by topic, not by color, she asked questions that didn't let me hide incompetence. Why the secrecy, Mira? What did you hope protection would buy you? We peeled back the logic. I wanted to be loved for what money can't buy. I also kept the parts that would test that love out of sight. That wasn't a con. It was a hedge. Hedges have costs. Meanwhile, Adrian wrote, not emails, letters, careful on thick paper the way a historian would apologize. He started therapy too. He told his parents he wouldn't discuss our marriage with them and changed the locks on the door they had keyed with expectations. He declined an endowed position Martin tried to engineer as a gesture. He called what his family does by its name, control and couture, and then stopped calling them every time a decision made him sweat. He didn't demand a timeline. He asked for a chance. After 2 months, I agreed to meet at the cafe where we had our first date. He sat with both hands around his cup, as if it might float away. I don't want to rehearse speeches, he said. I want to show you changes, not recite them. Then here are my terms, I said. No romances blanket. Couples therapy every week. Clear boundaries with your parents, stated and kept. Radical transparency between us, financial, emotional, practical. No more split life. You meet my world. I meet yours. And we renovate the house so it looks like 2 people live there, not a brochure for one family's idea of good taste. He didn't flinch. Yes, we staged the renovation like a project with milestones and dust. We took down a wall that turned the kitchen into a corridor and built a table that wanted conversation, not display. The study became a proper office with a door I could close when contracts needed quiet. We boxed the monogram napkins and replaced them with linen that didn't announce anyone's initials. We hung photographs I'd taken at properties over the years, light through a stairwell in Santa Fe, a stone balustrade in New Orleans, beside his prints of manuscripts and cornices. The house began to sound like us 2 sets of footsteps, not one set pretending. The first test came sooner than I expected. Celeste invited us to dinner. Nothing elaborate, just family. On the drive over, Adrian said, if there's a line we leave together, non-negotiable. He looked like a man who had rehearsed a boundary and was nervous to perform it without a prompt. Celeste tried charm as strategy. She complimented my work with adjectives she used to save for donors, then slid a remark across the table like a coaster. If only we had known who you were from the start. Adrian set down his fork. Mom, he said, calm and steady. Mira didn't hide a trick. She chose privacy because our family equates net worth with worth. That ends now. Silence. Then Martin changed the subject to market volatility, as if he could move the conversation by changing the weather. He couldn't. Something had shifted. We didn't let it shift back. We kept going to therapy, to ordinary kindness, to arguments that didn't require a referee, to apologies that didn't come with hedges. Some nights we failed. Some mornings we tried again. The point wasn't a cinematic transformation. The point was practice. Ava wrote to me a month after the wedding coffee. She looked different without the choreography of an event, quieter, less lacquered. Your line about people over pictures, she said, it keeps looping in my head. She talked about expectations that felt like a dress borrowed from someone taller. She asked me how to tell the difference between family pressure and her own voice. I didn't tell her what to do. I told her the trick I use, pretend you have a daughter. What would you want her to learn from watching you? She teared up. Not that safety requires erasing myself, she said. In time, quietly, she moved out. The divorce filing came later with no speeches and no column inches. Sometimes survival looks like a soft landing, not a headline. 1 year after the wedding, we hosted Stellaris' anniversary at the Crescent, 10 years since I hung the first lobby light with my own hands. The ballroom glowed the way it does when a plan becomes a place. My team buzzed in their linen and name badges. Anthony ran the room like a concerto. Adrian stood with me at the step and repeat, smiling in a way that didn't look like performance. Celeste and Martin attended as guests. They were polite, careful, and perhaps sincerely proud. I was kind without performing gratitude for behavior that met the baseline. After the speeches, we went up to the roof. The city loosened below us like a tie. Adrian leaned on the parapet. "Last year I tried to keep peace by making you small," he said. "This year I have learned peace doesn't require anyone's disappearance." He didn't promise forever. He promised the next right thing, and the next one after that. I have learned to trust that kind of promise more than the kind that comes in rings and declarations. "Here's what I want," I said. "A marriage where neither of us disappears to make the room look tidy. Respect that doesn't need a contract to enforce it. And room for both of our lives without a seam." "Then we keep choosing that," he said. "When it's easy, especially when it isn't." We stood there long enough for the catering team to flick the lights below to closing. When we finally stepped into the elevator, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time: match stride. I've stopped apologizing for not making myself smaller. I no longer call it privacy when it's really fear. I also don't confuse honesty with a blowtorch. Boundaries are not walls. They're doorways with frames you don't pretend aren't there. People sometimes ask why I didn't cancel the wedding when I could. Power isn't only the ability to end something, it's the discretion to set conditions that make a better future possible. That day, the condition was respect. Today and tomorrow, the condition is the same. When guests left the anniversary with gift bags and crumbs on their cuffs, I lingered in the empty ballroom. The chandeliers hummed their low electricity. On a table near the back sat a framed photo from the early Crescent days, plaster dust in my hair, a grin on my face, a lobby that wasn't yet a lobby. I touched the glass and felt the steadiness that comes from meeting your own gaze without flinching. I am no longer the invisible owner of my life. I am the woman who makes rooms and keeps one for herself. Thank you so much for listening to today's story. If this story resonated with you or made you reflect, I'd love to hear your thoughts, so feel free to share them in the comments below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you won't miss the next story. I'll see you next time as we continue exploring more journeys and lessons together.